I remember when I decided that I wanted to be an artist. And one of the things that you kind of realize is that, like, all through school, you're taught that, like, most artists, right? Like, most famous artists never really become famous until after they're dead. So then it's like a weird thing. Like, you don't really study any, like, famous artists that are still alive, right? You just kind of study, like, dead artists. This is Monet, this is Van Gogh, this is Picasso. And then it makes you question. It's like, well, how do I make money as an artist? Right? If I'm not going to be famous until I'm dead. One of the things I figured out, right, is that you need to figure out, you need to figure out personally, like, what your niche is. Who is going to buy your artwork? If you do fine art, there's a market for it. If you do graphic design, obviously there's a market for it. If you do murals or anything, if you do tattoos, if you do photography, maybe you do kids art, maybe you do, like, illustration, maybe you need to figure out your niche, because each niche is going to buy something different. Okay, like, people that like fine art, probably aren't going to be a whole, and this is just hypothetically speaking, right? Like, I don't know the facts on this, but I just know that, like, odds are, like, if you do anime, but you're trying to sell your stuff to your grandmother who really likes, like, oil paintings of trees and, like, landscapes, she may buy one off of you, but at the same time, it's not like it's not what she's really looking for. At the same time, if you got a buddy of yours that does fine art and they do really good fine art, it's like you may want to introduce them, because your buddy that does fine art may know somebody that likes really digs anime comics or something. Or if you do a lot of graphic design or logo work, once again, it's like you have to figure out what your niche is. Who's going to buy what you do? And there's a lot of different platforms out there to sell what your art is. If you do caricatures, there are platforms for that. There are places, there are venues that are looking for people that do things like that. If you do big, gigantic wall art pieces, like I'm working on, and this isn't just what I do, but it's one of those things that I happen to have a really high tolerance for pain when it comes to detail, right? So I'm working on this piece, and it is a friggin', like, I got about 50 logos up on this wall, and I've been here for 2 weeks. I don't know, like, and each one of these is literally getting done by hand. Because I can't use a brush for the detail on a lot of these. So I've probably dropped close to, 150, actually closer to $300 now, just on markers, paint markers, to get the detail that I need. Okay, but, like, I can do murals, I can do big, large pieces, and I can get the detail and everything else that I need to do it. So you got to figure out your niche. Okay, if you do a lot of graphic design stuff and you got some really cool designs and, like, nobody's buying it, guess what? There are platforms out there where you can sell. You can do t-shirts, and sell stuff online, sell stuff on Facebook, sell stuff, on Shopify or something. It's just really just figuring out your niche. Okay. And that's what I really want to just break it down to, like I run an art company, and I've been doing it for almost 15 years now. And I remember when we first started, like, we had the best deal in town on framed art. Like, nobody could even mess with us on the cost on framed art, because we had our own factories where we made our own stuff, and we sold our own product. And then a few years ago, I want to say like 6-7 years ago maybe, like, you can buy art, like framed crap art, at Kroger or Home Depot or Lowe's or Target or Bed Bath & Beyond. Everybody sells framed art, like prints and things like that. And it put a huge dent in our profit margins and our target market, because, our only competition at the time was, they were like local framers, like guys that actually did framing, and we could legitimately say, hey, these are normally $300 if you get them from a framer. We're selling them today for, 50, 60, 70, 80, $100. Nowadays, though, we've had to go very, very target specific, very niche specific. My company now sells a lot more sports photography and a lot more like historical, like very local, very niche art, because it diversifies us from everybody else. So that's what I want you to realize. It's like, you can be the best painter in the entire world, okay? But it's like, when you start selling your stuff, figure out who you're gonna buy it. I mean, if you think about, like, all right, so if you're familiar with H.R. Geiger, right, the guy that designed like the aliens and stuff, he does some really freaky, just trippy shit. Like, I love his art. I've got a signed book by him that I friggin' love. But it's like, that's not like what you'd consider commercial art. I mean, that's very specific. You know, I knew a guy in New York, Soren, who like had some of his originals, and he paid an exorbitant amount of money for those. Okay, just a ridiculous amount, but he had the money to do it. And that's what I'm saying. It's like, if you've got great art and there's a market for it, you just got to figure out who your buyers are. Who's going to buy your shit? You know, plain and simple. Who's going to buy your art? Okay? Who's going to buy your art? And then beyond that, how do you get your art in front of them? Okay? How do you get your product, your art, your designs, your statues, your sculptures? You know, just another example here. I actually did some work for a real estate company, you know, a couple weeks ago, and they had these monstrous, I'm talking, they were probably about 20 feet, 25 feet wide by about 10, 15 feet tall, these gigantic canvas paintings that were ungodly, just gross. They were the ugliest things I've seen in a very, very, very long time. And the property manager was telling me that the owners of the building paid close to $30,000 a piece for these pieces, for these paintings, and they were so shitty. It was like a yellow background with like a red triangle and a circle, and that was about all the detail that the pieces had in them. But these guys paid $30,000 a piece for them. Why? Well, probably because they needed something that big, and you know, the person, I don't know, I'm guessing gigantically huge canvases are hard to come by. So when you paint and you can paint that big, you know, you can ask a ridiculous amount of money for them. So it's just something to think about. You know, if you want to start making money, or let's just say you are making money from your art, but you want to make more money, figure out who's going to buy your stuff. Who's your client base? Who's going to be your customer base? Okay, and then you just write it down. You know what I mean? You may do something that may be a little bit more commercial. You may do something that's very niche specific. You may do something that's just very like, how do you put it, man? It's just you may just have a very, very targeted group of people that are going to like what you have. You know, let's just say you just do characters, or you do comic book art, guys. There are people that go to comic conventions and sell their own art at comic conventions. Why can't you do it? You know? Or why haven't you done it? Probably either because you haven't thought about it, or you're like, well, nobody's going to buy my shit. Well, let me tell you something. Other people are buying art every day. Okay, there are people out there buying art every single day. And you just got to get your stuff in front of them. Okay, so if you're really serious about selling your stuff, I mean, you have an abundance of artwork sitting around, and you're like, man, I wonder who would buy this. Think about it. You know, think about who would be interested in what you're doing. Think about who would be interested in what you got. And then get your art in front of them and throw a price at them. Because you know what? You may be the next $30,000 painter. You know what I mean? You may be the next $100,000, you know, a year income earner, you know, just through creative work. Okay? It's not as difficult as you make it seem. So screw what everybody else is telling you. Screw what your parents are telling you. Screw what your friends are telling you. They don't do it. If they're not creative and they've never done anything like this before, don't get so caught up in what they say, okay? Artists need to support artists. And as an artist, I'm making these videos and I'm putting this whole thing together to help other artists, okay? Because I'm tired of broke artists struggling and not reaching their full creative ability because they're working full-time for somebody else in shit jobs that they hate and not ever really reaching the full potential that they want because they don't have the time or the money or the budget or even the supplies to work on what they're working on, you know? I mean, I just want to help you, you know? I want to help you. I want to see every artist out there, you know, eating, living, surviving, struggling, fuck surviving, man, just thriving, thriving. Because what's the point of going to school? Arts, let's say, 'cause I'm an art school dropout, okay? Because I realized I didn't want to work for anybody. I wanted to work for myself, and it's just like, what's the point? But I still owed money for, when I went to school. But it's like, what's the point of spending all that money to go to school if you're not actually going to go pro, okay? And let's just say you graduated, or you didn't graduate, or whatever. Figure out your niche, okay? You could do fashion stuff. Art is a part of culture, okay? And that's the whole thing. You can judge a culture based on its art. People buy art because we're in a very, very abundant time in culture, okay? Trust me. Anyway, I'll see you in the next video. Max Uvas, peace, and I'm out.
We've been on the trail